Right over. Now I come to my favorite topic, antimicrobial stewardship, the aspirin of 21st century. Okay. See, how many of you have read Homo sapiens from Yuval Harari? I'm sure there are few hands in the audience, One of the most widely read books in the last 5 years. There are 2 volumes, Homo sapiens and Homo Deus. Okay. Yuval Harari writes, famine, epidemics, and war. These have been the 3 biggest killers of humanity since time immemorial. Okay. And you can count the last 1,000 years. Okay. And almost every 200 years, there has been a major epidemic. In the 14th century, the big plague of Europe, 220 million people died. Then after 200 years, 16th century, smallpox killed 20 million people. 19th century, about 400,000 people died of flu and TB. Then in the 20th century, the famous Spanish flu. And now we know, of course, the COVID. So you can see epidemics have been one of the biggest killers. Now look at the difference which antibiotics have made in this mortality. The first antibiotic was used commercially in 1941-42 in the Second World War. Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin. It was still not commercialized. He discovered penicillin in 1929. It was a serendipitous discovery. But it was not commercialized till 1941. Okay. Till in the Second World War, you saw the patients with the soldiers with gunshot wounds, Staph aureus infection started dying. That's when for the first time you started using penicillin on a large scale. Okay. So the story of antibiotics is hardly 80 years old. We are in 2023. The first use was 1941-42. So it's just an 80-year-old miracle. And look at the difference, the impact of antibiotics on historical mortality. Look at endocarditis. 75% reduction in the mortality after the antibiotics came into being. Pneumonia, 30% reduction. Brain infection, 60% reduction. And just compare the last statistic. Myocardial infarction treatment with aspirin and streptokinase has only reduced mortality by 3%. Okay. Now compare this with antibiotics. Okay. So I think this class of drugs has still the biggest impact in the history of mankind so far. No drug has been able to save more lives than antibiotics. What was the average life expectancy of India when we got independence? 37 to 40. And today we are closing to 73, 74. I stay in Singapore, the average life expectancy is 84. But 50, 60 years ago, this was half than this. And one of the major reasons is antibiotics. Okay. So I always say we have to pass 4 things to our next generation: clean air, clean water, fuel, and antibiotics. And all 4 are in danger. Okay. And if some of you are dozing off in this lecture, we are missing out on this very important class of drugs which you have to pass to your project. Okay. So another reason to listen attentively to this very fascinating story. I'm going to tell you a story of antibiotics. This is not an educational lecture. This drug is it's a Bollywood soap opera, the rise and the fall of antibiotics. Okay. Look at this, antibiotics. There was an age of ignorance. Okay, before 1920s. We did not know. There was witchcraft, there was whatever, there was upri hawa, as used to say, for infection. And then came the golden age, which was discovery of streptomycin, penicillin in 40s. And then 40s to 70s was the golden period. This was like, the honeymoon, the playground of antibiotics for these 30 years, 1940 to 1970. So all your cephalosporins, first, second generation, amoxicillin, they were all discovered during this time. And can you imagine, such was the aura of antibiotics. There was a guy who made a prophecy in 1969. His name was William Stewart. He was the US Surgeon General. He made a prophecy in 1969. क्या कहा उसने? वो कह रहा, by the year 2000, we would have closed the book on infectious disease. भाई साहब ने भविष्यवाणी कर दी that by the year 2000, there will be no infectious disease. Can you imagine the glory of antibiotics during those days? Okay, and see how horribly he has gone wrong. That now WHO says that by the year 2040, we may enter a post-antibiotic era. देखिए पूरे 100 साल के बाद, that period before 1941 is known as pre-antibiotic era. 2040 we may enter that era again. Okay, और जिस तरह से हमने एजिथ्रोमाइसिन और डॉक्सीसाइक्लिन यूज किया है ना कोविड में, I can tell you the resistance this 2040 may have been advanced now even 5-6 years or even more. Okay, rampant misuse of azithromycin and doxy and even meropenem in ICU for COVID patients. But anyway, so that was the time, and one of my teachers used to say, antibiotics are the victims of their own success. Okay, so क्या हुआ 1970s 80s के बाद? MRSA, the first resistant pathogen, then ESBL, the second resistant. So resistance started coming up. Now, I am from pharma industry, and pharma industry looks at ROI. When you take 15 years to develop a drug and bacteria can become resistant in 15 days, where is the revenue? So after 1980s, pharma industry started moving away from antibiotics. The age of neglect started. और उसी टाइम पे आ गया chronic diseases, depression, Alzheimer's, diabetes, hypertension, hypercholesterolemia, cash cows. The biggest drug till date is atorvastatin. $150 billion atorvastatin has earned in its lifespan. Okay, the biggest antibiotic so far has been ceftriaxone. Okay, by the way, in terms of revenue. But after 80s, pharma companies started neglecting antibiotics. Because the resistance was high, they said, why spend $1 billion in developing one drug and bacteria takes a fortnight to become resistant? Then in the beginning of this century, started the age of reality. कि नहीं भाई, अगर antibiotics नहीं बचेंगे, we would jeopardize the advancement in medicine. Can you imagine what will happen to chemotherapy? Hip and knee replacements. We all do these procedures with the guarantee of antibiotics, right? So if the resistance is so high, the advancements in the modern medicine will be jeopardized. That is what we are staring today. Okay, just see the rise, the fall, and hopefully the rise again, touch wood, of antibiotics in future. That's the fascinating story of this class of drugs. Okay, so how do we define antimicrobial resistance? Now, it's a this is a very good slide. I again borrowed this slide from one of our professors in Chennai. He says antibiotics is a societal resource. ठीक है, तीन चीजें हैं: use, overuse, and abuse. Anything which is a societal resource, water, fuel, electricity, they're all societal resources. So we have to use them judiciously. So this is the balance we have to keep. If you use for an individual, controls infection, reduces morbidity, save lives. But the collateral damage on the society, resistance is increasing, more costs, So we have to maintain this balance between use, overuse, and abuse. Because remember, antibiotics is a societal resource. You can't use it with your own whims and fancies. Okay. Now, very beautiful slide. It explains. So मैंने कल बताया था कि there is something known as selection pressure. Now, what is selection pressure? Selection pressure is the pressure exerted on the resistant mutants to get selected out. Okay, easy भाषा में समझते हैं. Look at the first circle, the purple bugs, and there's one with a red outline. Now, nature has prepared bacteria and every one of us to survive. So in nature, there are certain wild mutants which are well prepared than the other strains because nature ने उनको एक protective mechanism दी है. They are known as mutants. Okay, they are resistant. So maybe in a population of 10 raised to power 5 bacteria, there are 1 or 2 mutants. Okay, doesn't matter. That's the natural balance. But when I give my antibiotic, it kills all the sensitive pathogen. But this one mutant that is preserved. Now what will happen? This mutant, pressure has been exerted on it to select it out. It will start growing. And it will start imparting this ability, this Raksha Kavach to its progeny. So initially the whole milieu, okay, the inoculum, which was full of sensitive bacteria. Now the inoculum is full of resistant mutant bacteria. This is known as selection pressure. This is the most common reason or the philosophy behind antibiotic resistance. That is why we say the more you use antibiotics, the more you lose them. Okay, so understand why we say that misuse, overuse of antibiotics will develop resistance, because wild mutant strains will get selected out and they will start producing their own kind. And the second is collateral damage. Okay, I'm sure you have seen, I think Arnold Schwarzenegger's movies, collateral damage, and we talk it in terms of war. You know, there is a beautiful Hollywood movie also on this, that if you, you know, these guys sitting in their Florida or Texas war rooms, they drop bombs through drones, you know, and that is based upon some information that maybe this is the vehicle in which there are terrorists. But suppose that vehicle is close to a public school, what do you do, right? And suppose you drop the bomb and the school is in the periphery of that, you may have collateral damage, right? That's how we understand collateral. The same thing happens in antibiotics. Now, suppose a patient is having pneumonia. Okay, most common cause is Streptococcus pneumoniae, right? For a community-acquired pneumonia. But suppose this patient is also smoker and he has Pseudomonas in his lungs, lying as commensal. Our gut is as 10 trillion bacteria. You know? So, but that Pseudomonas is sitting Shanti say in the lungs doing nothing. Now, when I give a broad spectrum drug to kill Streptococcus pneumoniae, but this drug also covers Pseudomonas, it unnecessarily irritates Pseudomonas, collateral damage. So what will happen? Streptococcus pneumoniae will be killed, but this Pseudomonas is now irritated unnecessarily. It thinks that, yes, I am being attacked. So what does it do? It starts to develop a resistance mechanism. Now, tomorrow, if the patient gets an infection with a Pseudomonas, it will be a resistant Pseudomonas, and the normal drug which we use will not be working. That's collateral damage. So, हम क्यों कहते हैं that use narrow spectrum antibiotics, because we don't want to increase collateral damage. Bacteria say either kill us or leave us alone. Don't irritate us. When we unnecessarily use broad spectrum antibiotics, we irritate them. We induce them to develop resistance. And then when वो सच में जब वो infection करते हैं, our carbapenems, peptides don't work, and then we have to use cholesterol. So remember this basic premise behind resistance: selection pressure, collateral. Okay, I'll just stop here because I know ये थोड़ा सा complex सा concept है. Maybe I have tried to simplify it, but just in case any questions, happy to answer. No, nothing. चले आगे. कहानी interesting है. Okay, right. Okay, I really value this guy, Jim O'Neill. This guy, Jim O'Neill, is an economist. He was an economist with Goldman Sachs Bank. Okay. 2014 में 13 में the then British Prime Minister David Cameron, he asked this guy Jim O'Neill, who was his advisor, can you do a review on antimicrobial resistance in the world? And this guy wrote 5 beautiful papers. And why his contribution is so immense, it was only after this paper and this one slide that the Western world started to worry about resistance. I am in this field since 2007. And I know I used to shout from the rooftops when I used to lecture in Europe or in US about antibiotic resistance. And these guys would say, oh, come on, this is a third world country problem. Okay. We don't have a resistance issue. And this was just 15, 20 years ago. But as soon as this paper came up, and he gave this statistic, देखो पैसा बोलता है ना? So he gave a number to resistance. He said, if we do not take any steps by the year 2050, 10 million, 1 crore log may die of AMR. And this number would be bigger than cancer and diabetes put together. Not only this, the world is going to lose $100 trillion in GDP. बस जैसे ये पेपर आया, after 2 years of this, the UN General Assembly had a separate session on antibiotics. पिछले 3-4 साल से every year UN General Assembly talks about AMR. You know, the GAIN Act, the PATH Act, even Obama issued some statement. So the whole world, Western world, started talking about resistance because of this one paper. Okay. Many people say this is a very alarming statistic. I said that's okay. It's good to err on the side of caution. Okay, so this was when the world wake up to AMR. So we have bad bugs, no drugs. This article came up around 20 years ago, and we say there is no escape. So this is a mnemonic for these 6 important pathogens: Enterococcus, Staph aureus, Klebsiella, Acinetobacter, Pseudomonas, and Enterobacter species. Okay, so these are the important resistant pathogens that we have. हाँ जी, अब हम ma'am, Banani ma'am, if you can hear me, I tend to talk little bit in Hindi beach mein. I hope people can understand. Most of the people can understand Hindi in this room.
Yeah, you're fine. Go ahead.
Okay, cool. Right. So, okay. Now, ये बड़ा important है समझना. What is MDR, XDR, and PDR? Because quite often we use these terms interchangeably. What is MDR? Multi-drug resistant, a bacteria which is resistant to 3 or more classes. Okay, so maybe it's resistant to beta-lactam, fluoroquinolone, aminoglycans. Okay, 3 or more classes is an MDR. XDR, resistant to everything except 1 or 2 classes. So usually anything which is carbapenem resistant, we call it XDR, क्योंकि वो सिर्फ tigecycline और colistin को sensitive होता है. Pan drug resistant, resistant to everything under the sun. इसमें क्या करना है? कुछ नहीं करना, भजन करना है, pray करना, right? Right. So that is pan drug resistant. Acinetobacter is fast becoming pan drug resistant, guys. Okay. Many hospitals in India have, even I know our data from China and other. Carbapenem resistant Acinetobacter is 80% plus. I know the data from certain Indian hospitals, colistin resistance 20-30% से ऊपर हो. So we have to remember this MDR, XDR, PDR. Now, what are the common bugs? MDR means we will say ESBL, MRS से MC, and I will talk about them later. What is this? They are MDRs. Anything which is carbapenem resistant, we call XDR. और इसमें 3 नाम important है: CRE, CRPA, and CRAB. CRE is carbapenem resistant Enterobacteriaceae. CRAB is carbapenem resistant Acinetobacter baumannii, and CRPA is carbapenem resistant Pseudomonas aeruginosa. Okay. ये देखो, WHO ने 2017 में ये रिपोर्ट निकाली. These 3 are the top most critical bugs for which we need new antibiotics. CRE, CRPA, and CRAB. Okay. Then there are high priority, medium priority, but these 3 are the major bugs. These are some of the new drugs which have come up in the last 5 years. Okay. So look at this. Okay. इससे जाने से पहले इस स्लाइड को ना बाद में because you will get confused. Okay. हाँ जी. India, the hotbed of AMS. We are fast becoming the world champions in diabetes, world champions in cardiovascular diseases, but we are also notoriously the world champions in AMR. This is a beautiful paper published by Lancet last year. Look at this data. MRSA, methicillin resistant Staph aureus. इसको हमने कल टच किया था. Staph aureus, which is resistant to methicillin or oxacillin. It is resistant to all beta-lactams. Drug of choice is vancomycin, teicoplanin, lenalizole. Okay. Now, ये बड़ी इंटरेस्टिंग चीज है. क्यों? देखो, MRSA से वेस्टर्न वर्ल्ड बड़ी अच्छी तरह जानकार है. West was worried about MRSA only till 20 years ago. Okay, this was the first resistance they found in 70s. Okay, and in India we thought हमारी problem is gram-negative resistance, not gram-positive. But look at this. Our MRSA rates are also 50 to 60%. But हमें ये कम लगता है because our gram-negative is 70 to 80%. So guys, gone are the days. Hello.
Includes hospital acquired and community acquired.
Ma'am, can't hear you.
Include hospital acquired and community acquired.
Ma'am, your voice is echoing, so I can't, or maybe you can text me.
Does this data include hospital-acquired MRSA and community-acquired?
Yes, yes. It's not only community-acquired MRSA. Yes, you are right. It's a mixture of data. It's not only HA or CA MRSA, right? So you can see hospital, this MRSA is 50 to 60%, very high rates of MRSA even in India. Otherwise, we thought it's a problem of West. Okay. ESBL, इसमें तो हम undisputed world champion. Extended spectrum beta lactamase, enzymes produced by E. coli and Klebsiella, which make penicillin, cephalosporins, and monobactams resistant. That is the ESBL. The first ESBL was isolated in 1981. Okay, and since then, this is a superstar among. This is the most successful resistant pathogen so far. Maybe after 5 years it could be NDM. But right now, ESBL, we say, is the most successful superstar bug. The rates of ESBL in India is, and now I am talking of, when I say ESBL, I am talking of hospital acquired. Nosocomial ESBL is 60, 70, 80% plus. Community ESBL also, I have data from some hospitals, some community, smaller cities, about 40% in UTI. Why ESBL was a watershed movement? Understand this thing. ESBL infection means you cannot use any smaller beta-lactam. You can't use cephalosporins, you can't use amoxiclav. Even for sicker patients, you can't use piptazole. So your only drug of choice is carbapenems. So क्या हुआ? पिछले 20 साल में, because ESBL was so high, हमने जम के carbapenem use किया. But remember, the more you use them, the more you lose them. Because we used so much of carbapenem for ESBL, that led to carbapenem-resistant Enterobacteriaceae, Pseudomonas, and Acinetobacter. So the fruits of ESBL management were offset by the scourge of CRE, CRPA, and CRAP. Okay, that's why ESBL was a watershed resistant pathogen. CRE, again, this is the most sinister. Yes, ma'am.
Nothing, please go ahead.
CRE, this is the most sinister bug these days in the ICU. सबसे ज़्यादा तंग Klebsiella कर रहा है आजकल. Okay. CRE, Klebsiella, and see Indian rates are 50 to 60%. Now, guys, this you have to remember one thing, and I think वो आगे जाके भी आएगा in our mechanisms of resistance. When we say carbapenem-resistant Enterobacteriaceae, there are basically 3 types of CRE: KPC, oxa, NDM. Three different types of enzymes. Okay, all three make carbapenem resistant, but their types are different: KPC, oxa, NDM. Now, this is important to understand because the new drugs which are coming are specific for these three varieties. Now, KPC is among the carbapenemases. KPC is most common in US and some parts of Europe, China. So China, some parts of Europe and the entire US is mainly KPC predominant. Oxa, the other part of Europe, some part of Middle East, and to some extent in India, it's oxa. And the third is NDM, which is called New Delhi Metallobeta-lactamase. Halanki, it was first found in Lahore, but somehow they gave the name New Delhi Metallobeta-lactamase. Anyways, okay. So NDM is mainly found in Indian subcontinent and wherever you see medical tourism. Why I'm saying this? Remember, NDM like ESBL is plasmid mediated. Any resistant pathogen which is plasmid mediated spreads very rapidly. It is just one flight away from the other continent. What is plasmid? Extra chromosomal DNA, avara DNA. It does not follow any hereditary patterns. It spreads resistance both vertically, horizontally. ये E. coli ने Klebsiella को दिया, Klebsiella ने आगे दे दिया, ऐसा वाला resistance. You know, haphazard resistance. That's what plasmid does. Why ESBL was so successful? It was plasmid mediated. That is the fear we have, that NDM is also plasmid mediated, right? And you see NDM very commonly in E. coli, और E. coli तो पानी में भी है. So can you imagine the havoc that NDM can cause? There was a study, Karol Bagh, Delhi. The sewage water was full of NDM. Okay, so suppose I have diarrhea, I go and poo in Europe, I transmit the NDM in the water of Europe. This is how resistance goes into the food chain. That's why the world is so worried about NDM. Okay? This could be the new superstar. NDM could be the new ESBL. Right now, it is mainly in Indian subcontinent and places where there is medical tourism. Australia, Thailand, Philippines. Now China is also having this. So this is a very important pathogen we have to think. And so far, no drug in the market. No drug. There is drug for KPC already, Pfizer's Zevicefta or ceftazidime avibactam. But for NDM, there is no drug. Okay. Crab, Acinetobacter. अब ये पैथोजन ना, इसको हमने जबरदस्ती अपना दुश्मन बना लिया. एसिडोबैक्टर कोई खतरनाक पैथोजन नहीं है. 1990 से पहले तक तो एसिडोबैक्टर को हम क्लासिफाई भी नहीं करते थे सेपरेटली फ्रॉम नॉन फर्मेंटर्स. We used to say non-fermenter, whether it is Pseudomonas or whatever. Okay, it's a very moisture-loving pathogen. So ICU sinks, ICU pipes, curtains. You take samples, you will see Acinetobacter. So it's not a pathogenic bacteria or a virulent bacteria like Klebsiella. The reason Acinetobacter has started killing is no drug works for it. It has become resistant very fast. That is the reason Acinetobacter is killing these days, because it's basically not pathogenic or not very pathogenic. But bacteria, it's becoming resistant very fast. And you can see the whole world is mostly now red or orange, 60-70%. Crab. And again, no new drugs still in the market. There is one new drug, cefiderocol, but India mein nahi aayi abhi, which deals with Acinetobacter. But again, the problem is 70-80% resistance. Okay, I love to show this one slide. And I have titled it, "Ignorance is not a bliss when it comes to your local antibiogram." Can anyone tell me from the audience? This is ceftriaxone, CI. This is E. coli and Klebsiella. What is the ESBL rate here? Or probable ESBL rate? Anyone?
तो बताओ.
We discussed this yesterday, little bit. Okay, so हमने कल क्या डिस्कस किया था? If E. coli or Klebsiella is resistant to any third generation cephalosporin, it's a surrogate marker. It could be an ESB. Okay. Now this data is from 2008. Imagine, 15 साल पहले, and this is from a government hospital in Delhi. I went there for a CME, and I asked in the audience, "What is your ESBL rate?" So one of the doctors told me, "Dr. Ankur, we don't have ESBL in our hospital." Oh, I said, "Sir, that's great. But why do you say that?" He says, "Because our microbiologist never tells us that ये ESBL है कि नहीं." Okay. So मैंने कहा भाई, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Okay. So I told them, "Can you show me whatever data you have today?" So they gave me this one slide. They said, "ये हमारा data." And I said, "Guys, you are sitting on a volcano of ESBLs. 89% of Klebsiella and E. coli have become resistant to ceftriaxone by a level of 89%. This could be your ESBL rate, and you say कि हमारे hospital में ESBL नहीं है क्योंकि हमें बताया नहीं." So please, ignorance is not a bliss. It's your right to ask for the antibiogram and to read the antibiogram. Okay? That's why I'm saying practicing critical care today without antibiograms is shooting in the dark. So the Indian scenario, I call this antibiotic anarchy in India. Okay? आप एक random sample लीजिए. Do this as a PG thesis for someone. Out of 100 discharged summaries, any department from psychiatry to diabetology, take discharge summaries. 80% of them would have an antibiotic in the discharge, along with an antacid, an NSAID, and maybe a multivitamin. So we have reduced antibiotics to the level of this. Laparoscopic cholecystectomy. Guidelines say single shot of prophylaxis. One shot. That's it. My aunt was admitted in one of the biggest private hospitals in North India for laparoscopic cholecystectomy. She was given third generation cephalosporin 24 hours before and 4 days after, while she was in the hospital. And when she was discharged, another 5 days of oral third generation. Okay. So that is our, because हमें लगता है कि oral is not antibiotic. Oral तो हम de-escalate कर ही दिया. Right? Only IV is an antibiotic. That's wrong. Okay, we'll talk about it. But this is our situation. Our hospital environment is not conducive to protocol. Many say in India we follow evidence-based medicine, not eminence-based, eminence-based medicine, not evidence-based. Okay, very few qualified ID specialists. I am from pharma company. We have also added to this chaos. Hindustan में meropenem more than 150 brands. 2,500 की भी मिलती है एक वायल और 250 की भी मिलती है. Right? So I have seen GPs writing meropenem twice a day, 500 mg BD for enteric fever. So resistance kahan jaye? So that is why there is antibiotic anarchy in India. That's why resistance rates are so high. Okay. Okay. So this is all what has happened in India. What is the resistance rates, types of resistant bacteria, MDR, XDR, PDR. अब हम जाएंगे, what are the mechanisms of resistance and how to interpret them. Ma'am, do we want to take a break?
Yeah, just a minute. चाय आया? नहीं आया? लेट ही आता है. Okay, you continue. We'll probably finish them.
So you just, ma'am, ping me when you want to take a break. Yeah. Okay. ठीक है. Mechanisms of resistance. I haven't seen a simpler diagram than this so far to define the core mechanisms of resistance, which are most common. So this diagram that you see, Imagine this diagram is of bacteria. Now my antibiotic has to enter inside, and this red colored square that you see, that's the target site. It could be a protein, it could be a cell wall, it could be a cell membrane, whatever. That's a target site. So my antibiotic has to enter through 2 green gates and attach to this red site in order to start acting. और बैक्टीरिया ने कुछ भी करना है ताकि ये ना हो सके, right? It will do anything possible to stop my antibiotic from attaching to this red site. And what all it does are the mechanisms of resistance. So first thing क्या कर सकता है? Gate बंद कर. Entry gate is closed. So this green gates, they are closed by bacteria. This is known as porin loss. Okay, and it is so sophisticated that these porins are antibiotic specific. It may close the porin for one drug but not for the other. Okay, porin loss is a very common mechanism of resistance in gram-negative bacteria, especially Klebsiella acinetobacter. That's the first one, porin loss. Second, so suppose my antibiotic now entered inside and is slowly moving towards its beloved, the red spot. Okay. Now what does it do? It throws these yellow bugs. What are these yellow bugs that you see? These are enzymes, beta-lactamases. Their role is to break the beta-lactam ring in the beta-lactam antibiotics and make them ineffective. Among all mechanisms of resistance, this is the most common mechanism of resistance in gram-negative and generally also. Okay, so the second mechanism, the second villain here is these yellow dots, which are the enzymes beta-lactamases. Okay, what is the third one? Now suppose my antibiotic is saved from porins, saved from enzymes, and is moving towards the red spot. Look at this light blue puffy structures. These are efflux pumps. What do? They suck the antibiotic and throw it outside the exit gate even before it can leave the red spot. That is efflux pumps. Again, these efflux pumps are antibiotic specific. Classical example, if your Pseudomonas produces efflux pumps, it will throw out meropenem but not imipenem. Okay, so these are so highly specific efflux pumps. Again, very common mechanism in Pseudomonas and Klebsiella that we see. And finally, the fourth mechanism, target site alteration, जिसको मैं कहता हूँ सनम बेवफा. Okay, why? My bacteria was now saved from all three, going towards its beloved, and it changes shape. Okay, it's a lock and key, it changes shape. Okay, target site modification so that my bacteria cannot attach there. Okay, this is a very common mechanism of resistance in gram-positive bacteria. So these are the four most common mechanisms of. The fifth one is a cell membrane detergent like colistin. You know, you remove the cell membrane and it becomes very permeable. The cell membrane becomes so permeable and the pH balance is disturbed, bacteria dies. Okay, that's the fifth one. But the most common are these four. And we will talk more in detail about the first one, which is the beta-lactamase, because यहीं से आते हैं ESBL, CRE, carbapenemase, KPC, NDM. These are all beta-lactamases basically. Okay. Another diagrammatic illustration. Okay. See, suppose this is how does target site modification work. These red bars are target site. The green balls were antibiotic. It had to bind, changes site. Okay, change its shape. So this is target site modification. Next, decreased permeability or porin loss. My green balls had to go through the red gates. The red gates stopped, blocked, cannot enter inside. Porin loss, very common in gram-negatives, in Pseudomonas. Antibiotic specific porins are there. Efflux pumps. The green antibiotic is entering inside, wanting to go to its target site. It is exited. Sucks it, pulls it, pushes it out of the exit gate. Okay, that's the efflux pump. And finally, these are beta lactamases. These pink pellets, these are the beta lactamase enzymes. So when they join with my green antibiotic, they break the beta lactam ring. So my antibiotic is destroyed. It can no longer enter inside. So this is the cartoon representation of the 4 most common mechanisms of resistance. This is, we all have to remember this. This is the simplest classification of beta lactamases. We call it Ambler classification. Okay, 4 groups. Group A, C, and D is serine. Group B is metalloenzymes. Why? There is zinc in them. Okay. In the serine group, group A, we have further sub-classification of the enzymes like CTXM, KPC, TEM. Group D, we have OXA. Group C, AMC. Group B, IMP, VIM, NDM. These are all names of different enzymes. Okay, and usually these are named either after the cities from they were first isolated or the antibiotic that they hydrolyze. Like NDM is New Delhi metallobitarate. IMP is imipenemase. It hydrolyzes imipenemase, like that. Okay. The name TEM, it was the first patient Timoneira from where we isolated. So very interesting names. So what are ESBLs? ESBL is TEM, SHB, and CTXM. They are ESBLs. And carbapenems is IMP, VIM, NDM, KPC, OXA. I'm sorry, there is no easier way to remember this. Okay, so this is the one slide you have to remember. ESBL is TEM, SHB, CTXM. Carbapenems is IMP, VIM, NDM, KPC, OXA. Okay. Now, this is a beautiful slide. It took me a lot of time to make this slide, but please, I will say take a printout and you can use this slide as your reference. Okay. Now look at the y-axis. As we go down, we are increasing the severity of beta lactamase, starting from classical beta lactamase, then ESBL, then AMC, then carbapenems. Okay. So this is the rows and the columns. So which isolates produce these enzymes? Next column is what antibiotics are affected, and final column is which antibiotics are not affected, and you can still use it. I find this one slide very useful to remember. Okay, so what are classical beta lactamases? They are produced by most gram-negative bacilli and some gram-positive. पुराने वाले शुरू में जो 50s 60s में आए थे. Okay. Which antibiotics don't work or are affected? Penicillin, ampicillin, amoxicillin, and first generation cephalosporin, cefalexine. They don't work. What will still work? So what you can use? Second, third, fourth generation cephalosporin, BL, BLIs, STONM, carbapenem. Okay, simple. Now come to ESBL. ESBL is the resistant variety of the classical. Okay. Who produces them? Mainly gram-negative, E. coli, Klebsiella. Which antibiotics don't work? Above, which means penicillin, MP, amoxi also, plus second, third, fourth generation and STONM are also gone. They can't be used. What still works? Carbapenems, tigecycline, phosphomycin and nitrofurantoin only for UTI. These are the oral options I told you yesterday. And the BL-BLIs. Imipenem relivectum is the new BLI, meropenem vaborbactam, ceftazidime avibactam, piperacillin tazobactam. These are the newer BL-BLIs. Okay. But drug of choice for ESBLs remain carbapenems for sicker patients and Magnex or Peptazo for less sick patients. If a patient with ESBL is in sepsis, don't use Peptazo. There is a complete study now which shows mortality is high. So there is no such confusion now. Simple. Patient not sick, not HAPVAP, simple UTI, pyelonephritis, for example, or an intra-abdominal infection. In the ward, you can use epiprezole. But in ICU, sick, bloodstream infections, HAP-VAP, carbapenem. Okay. AMC ESBL का बड़ा भाई है. The only difference between AMC and ESBL is in AMC, BL-BLIs also don't work. In ESBL, carbapenems, BL-BLIs work. But in AMC, BL-BLIs also don't work. So drug of choice remains carbapenem or digoxin. And the final one is carbapenemases, enzymes which hydrolyze carbapenems. We have KPC, MBLs. MBL ka full form, metallo-beta-lactamase. Why metallo? They have zinc in them. The class B. Okay, IMP-WIM NDM. NDM is the most common MBL, plasmid mediated, I told you. And then even in OXA, we have different types. OXA 23, 48, 40, 58. The most common is OXA 48, which is Klebsiella. Who produces them? Klebsiella pseudoacinetone. क्या चला जाता है इसमें? Everything is gone. Penicillin, BL, BLI, cephalosporin, even carbapenem. Drug of choice, colistin, digoxin, or your three newer drugs. Cazavis, ceftazidime avibactam, meropenem vaborbactam, imipenem relebactam. But एक बात याद रखो, ये तीनों काम करती हैं only KPC, not in NDM. और इंडिया में क्या है? Mainly NDM. Iravacycline is a new drug, still not launched in India. Plasmomycin is a new drug, not launched in India. Cefiderocol is a new drug, not launched in India. So in India, what the doctors are doing right now to treat NDM is colistin plus phosphomycin or colistin plus tigecycline. Or what they are doing, Cazavi, which is Pfizer's drug, ceftazidime avibactam plus estrione. This combination is used a lot. Why? Cazavi, ceftazidime avibactam will kill OXA and KPC. Estrione kills NDM. Together, these two give a full coverage. Okay, because in India we don't have Irava, Plazo, Cefiderocol, meropenem, nothing. We have only colistin, tigecycline, phosphomycin, ceftazidime avibactam, and estrione. I'll stop here because this was complex and heavy. So if you have questions, I'll answer.